George Takei just became the honorary chair of Banned Books Week 2025, and it's proving that Star Trek's vision of infinite diversity is now fighting real-world censorship. The American Library Association announced that the 88-year-old Takei will serve as honorary chair of Banned Books Week, which takes place October 5 to 11, while ABC News reports that libraries and bookstores around the country will highlight books that have been censored, from Maya Kobe's Genderqueer to Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. This appointment represents the perfect fusion of science fiction idealism and literary activism, where Takei's decades of fighting discrimination meet the current book banning crisis. The October timing shows how Banned Books Week has become the most important literary event of the year as censorship reaches unprecedented levels. Takei's Star Trek legacy of promoting diversity makes him the ideal spokesperson for defending intellectual freedom against authoritarian book banning. This represents the evolution of celebrity activism, where entertainment icons become literary freedom fighters. The timing proves that book banning has become serious enough to require major celebrity intervention to raise public awareness.
A Texas A&M professor just got fired for teaching LGBTQ+ content in a children's literature course, and it's proving that academic freedom is dead in red states. Valley Central reports that the Texas A&M professor was fired for teaching LGBTQ+ content in children's literature course, raising questions about academic freedom and political influence in university education. This firing represents the expansion of book banning from K-12 schools into higher education, where even university professors can't discuss diverse literature. The children's literature focus proves that censorship advocates are targeting the most innocent forms of LGBTQ+ representation in books. This case shows how political influence has infiltrated university hiring and firing decisions based on course content rather than academic merit. The timing coincides with Banned Books Week preparations, creating a stark example of why literary censorship activism is desperately needed. This firing represents the complete breakdown of academic freedom, where professors face job loss for teaching diverse perspectives in literature. The Texas location proves that red state universities are becoming hostile environments for professors who include LGBTQ+ authors in their curriculum. This case shows how book banning has evolved from student protection to faculty persecution.
Ian McEwan just released a new dystopian novel, and it's proving that literary masters are warning us about our terrifying future through fiction. The Times-Union reports that literary mystery meets dystopian future in Ian McEwan's latest work, with the British novelist and screenwriter speaking to press during an interview in London on September 12th. This dystopian turn represents McEwan's evolution from psychological realism to speculative fiction as contemporary reality becomes too strange for traditional literary approaches. The timing shows how established literary authors are abandoning realistic fiction for dystopian warnings about political and social collapse. This genre shift proves that even prestigious literary novelists recognize that dystopian fiction has become the most relevant way to address current political crises. The London interview timing shows how British authors are responding to global authoritarianism through speculative literature. This represents the evolution of literary fiction, where dystopian elements become necessary tools for serious authors to address contemporary political reality. The mystery element proves that McEwan is using genre conventions to make dystopian warnings more accessible to mainstream readers. This novel represents the merger of literary prestige and dystopian urgency.
Caroline Calloway just teamed up with Hunter Brooke to launch a fraud investigation podcast, and it's the most shocking career pivot in literary influencer history. Red 94 reports that fans felt shock when Caroline Calloway teamed with Hunter Brooke to launch a podcast focused on exposed fraud and investigations, representing a complete transformation from Instagram literary influencer to investigative journalist. This partnership represents the evolution of literary influencers from book promotion to actual journalism, where social media fame becomes a platform for serious investigative work. The fraud focus proves that Calloway is using her controversial reputation to expose financial crimes rather than just promote books. This Hunter Brooke collaboration shows how literary influencers are gaining credibility by partnering with established investigative organizations. The timing represents the maturation of social media literary culture, where influencers transition from content creation to actual journalism. This podcast launch proves that literary influencer drama can evolve into legitimate investigative reporting when channeled properly. The fraud investigation focus shows how Calloway is using her experience with online controversy to understand and expose digital scams. This represents the redemption arc, where problematic literary influencers become valuable investigative journalists through their understanding of online manipulation.
An author is desperately seeking help with hybrid publishing after 13 years, and it's exposing how the publishing industry has completely abandoned new writers. Threads user The Henry Klein posted that their 5th novel was already in the works of being published when they needed help from authors, editors, and literary agents on the subject of hybrid publishing, revealing they went to a writing conference 13 years ago at age 17. This 13-year struggle represents the complete failure of traditional publishing to support emerging authors who are forced into predatory hybrid models. The 5th novel detail proves that even prolific authors can't break into traditional publishing despite years of dedication and multiple completed manuscripts. This hybrid publishing desperation shows how the industry has created a 2-tier system where authors pay to publish rather than earning advances. The Writing Conference origin story proves that the publishing industry has been misleading young authors about realistic career paths for over a decade. This case represents the evolution of publishing, where hybrid models exploit author desperation rather than provide legitimate publishing opportunities. The age 17 starting point shows how the industry targets young writers with false promises before abandoning them to predatory publishing schemes.
Sarah Ferguson just got exposed calling Jeffrey Epstein a supreme friend in a newly surfaced email, and it's destroying her literary reputation forever. NBC News reports that a newly surfaced email revealed that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, described Jeffrey Epstein as a supreme friend despite his conviction for sex crimes, adding new fuel to the royal scandal. This supreme friend language proves that Ferguson maintained close personal relationships with convicted sex offenders while building her children's book career. The newly surfaced timing shows how Epstein connections continue to emerge and destroy reputations years after his death. This email represents the complete destruction of Ferguson's credibility as a children's author when her personal associations contradict her public image. The Duchess of York title being connected to Epstein friendship proves that royal literary figures use their status to maintain relationships with criminals. This scandal represents the intersection of literary reputation and criminal association, where book careers become impossible after Epstein connections are revealed. The "despite his conviction" detail proves that Ferguson continued the friendship even after knowing about Epstein's crimes. This case shows how literary careers built on wholesome family content can be destroyed by criminal associations.
Kenyan publishers are warning of massive textbook delays because the government owes them 3 billion shillings, and it's proving that publishing is collapsing worldwide. Eastleigh Voice reports that publishers warn of delays in grade 10 textbooks rollout over 3 billion shillings government debt, while noting that piracy continues to erode industry revenues, with publishers losing up to 250 million shillings annually due to illegal sales. This 3 billion debt represents the complete breakdown of government support for educational publishing in developing countries. The grade 10 textbook delays prove that government financial irresponsibility is directly harming student education and literacy development. This case shows how publishing industry collapse affects the most vulnerable populations who depend on government-funded educational materials. The 250 million annual piracy losses prove that publishers face attacks from both government non-payment and criminal book theft. This represents the global nature of publishing industry crisis, where even educational publishers can't survive government debt and piracy. The timing shows how developing country publishers face impossible financial pressures that threaten educational access. This case proves that publishing industry problems extend far beyond Western markets to affect global literacy and education.
Google's ad monopoly is going to federal court, and it could completely destroy how publishers make money online. The Wall Street Journal reports that a federal court will begin hearing testimony to decide what penalties Google should face for unlawful practices in digital ads software business, representing a potential revolution in how publishers earn revenue from online content. This monopoly case represents the most important legal battle for publishing industry survival in the digital age. The unlawful practices finding proves that Google has been systematically stealing revenue from publishers through monopolistic advertising control. This federal court intervention shows how government antitrust action could restore fair competition in digital advertising that publishers desperately need. The penalty phase proves that Google faces real consequences that could fundamentally change how online publishing revenue works. This case represents the potential salvation of digital publishing, where breaking Google's monopoly could restore publisher profitability. The digital ads software focus proves that Google's technical control over advertising has created unfair advantages that harm content creators. This represents the most important moment for publishing industry economics since the invention of the internet, where monopoly breaking could save digital media.
The Nobel Prize has a dark history of controversial winners and refusals that proves literary awards are more political than artistic. TBS News reports on the Nobel Prize's good, bad, and ugly moments, noting that Jean-Paul Sartre declined the 1964 Nobel Prize in Literature because he had consistently declined all official honors, while Lee Duc-Tho also refused his prize. This refusal history proves that even Nobel laureates recognize the political nature of literary awards rather than pure artistic merit. The Sartre refusal represents the ultimate rejection of institutional literary recognition by authors who value artistic independence over official validation. This controversy analysis shows how Nobel Prize politics have created decades of questionable decisions that prioritize political messaging over literary excellence. The consistent refusal pattern proves that some authors view Nobel recognition as compromising their artistic integrity rather than celebrating it. This represents the fundamental tension between a literary achievement and political recognition, where awards become tools of cultural diplomacy. The official honors rejection shows how serious authors distinguish between artistic success and institutional approval. This history proves that literary awards have always been political instruments rather than objective measures of artistic merit.
Great authors keep getting snubbed by the Pulitzer Prize because of political controversy, and it's proving that literary awards punish artistic courage. A YouTube analysis discusses what stops great authors from winning a Pulitzer, explaining how changing standards and subjective opinions influence the decision-making process, and how controversy or political themes can impact award decisions. This systematic exclusion represents the cowardice of literary institutions that prioritize safe choices over groundbreaking artistic work. The political theme's impact proves that Pulitzer judges punish authors for addressing controversial subjects rather than rewarding artistic bravery. This analysis shows how changing standards allow award committees to exclude deserving authors based on contemporary political pressures rather than lasting artistic merit. The subjective opinion's influence proves that Pulitzer decisions reflect committee politics rather than objective literary evaluation. This represents the complete breakdown of literary award credibility, where political safety becomes more important than artistic excellence. The controversy avoidance shows how literary institutions have become conservative gatekeepers rather than champions of artistic innovation. This pattern proves that the most important literary voices are systematically excluded from major awards because they challenge rather than comfort establishment thinking.